Hey everyone. Before we begin looking at the interface and figuring out what everything does, make sure you have the newest version of FaceFusion installed, which, as of this video's release, is version 2.1.1 that added a few new features and improvements. If you do not have FaceFusion installed at all, make sure to watch my clean install video that I will have linked in the top right of the video right now, or in the information below the video. However, if you already have version 2.0.0 installed, let's do a quick upgrade on it. You can skip to the next chapter if you've already done this. First, open up your terminal application and make sure you are in the FaceFusion directory. You should be able to just type cd FaceFusion. Once you're in the proper directory, type the following command: git pull, and hit enter. What this will do is it'll pull, or basically download, the newest version of FaceFusion from GitHub. As I've had problems in the past, I'm going to next create the virtual environment. So type the commands for Mac and Linux, if you're on either of those. And there, now you're in a virtual environment. For Windows users, these are the commands that you should be using instead of those last two. Then, to install the new version that's been pulled, type in this command. At this point, as per before, you need to pick out which type of system you're using. So for me, I'll just be picking default, as I am on an M1 Mac, or any Mac, you'll be picking default. If you're using an NVIDIA-based GPU, choose CUDA. Otherwise, I believe ROCm is for anyone using an AMD GPU. CPU, I'm not sure who would actually pick just that. Then for another part of the install, you choose, again, kind of the same things, but instead for Mac, you will choose between Legacy, which is if you're on an Intel Mac. Otherwise, you will choose Silicon if you're on an M1, M2, or M3 Mac. CUDA, again, once again, if you are on NVIDIA. And I'm not sure which of these two are what you're supposed to be using if you're on AMD. I believe it's one of those two. Watch it do its installation. And that's it. At this point, it should be installed. But as per usual, I believe when you run it for the first time, you will get some more downloads and installs automatically. Let's find out. As always, to run it, type the command python run.py. Looks like there aren't any more installs. That was it. So you're ready to go at that point. Pick up the URL here and copy that and put it into your browser.
And here we are. Starting off, I'm going to show you the absolute basics so that you can easily and quickly create your first swap. If you already know the app pretty well, or just need to know about specific parts of the app, feel free to skip around the chapters I've set up. First, up in the top left, you should already have FaceSwapper selected. Next, go down to the execution providers, and depending on which platform you are working on, make sure you have the correct selections selected. On a Mac, if you can, make sure Core ML is selected. On an NVIDIA GPU machine, make sure you have CUDA selected. On an AMD GPU machine, make sure you have, whatever option you're supposed to have. Not sure, to be honest. Weirdos. Again, for quick and simple, skip everything else on the left. Now in the middle, you'll drag an image to source, or you can click on and find your file. This is the image you want the person in the new image to look like. Below that is the target. Drag, or click and find your image or video that you want to change the person's face from into the source images. At this point, if your image or video only has one obvious person in it that you want to swap, you should be able to click the start button below in the middle and then wait for the output, and done. That at times can be literally all there is to it. Now, what the heck is everything else? Let's look at the execution providers. I already mentioned it, but just make sure you have Core ML, CUDA, or whatever it is for AMD selected. Otherwise, renders will take much, much longer. The execution thread count is based on the amount of VRAM you have. So this depends on the GPU that you have. I have a 16GB M1 Mac Mini, so I set it to 16, and that seems to work closest to the optimal speed, but because it's shared memory on Apple Silicon, anywhere from about 10 to 16 gets roughly the same results. Apparently, with dedicated graphics cards, you can go with a 2-to-1 ratio. So if it's a 16GB card, you can go with 32 threads. The execution queue count I don't touch. Most people will probably keep that at 1. I would only try increasing it if you are already getting really good speeds. But try it out with a small file and test it for yourself. Max memory is there more as a limiter. Leave it at 0 and it will use as much memory as it can. Otherwise, if you need a certain amount of memory available for other tasks on your computer, you can change it to suit your needs. The output path is something that I wish worked a little bit better. You can see that by default it has a very weird path. This is where any videos and images you create will automatically reside. You can change it to whatever directory you like. However, I ran into a problem where it doesn't seem to like any spaces in the path. And if it did have any spaces, it would fail if I tried to output anything. The other problem that I have with it is that it doesn't save the path that you change it to. So the next time you come into FaceFusion, it will be set back to its default. I just don't change it, and I make sure I have easy access to the Finder for that directory. On a Mac, in order to see that directory, you need to show hidden files. To do this, type Command-Shift-, and again to hide them. Once visible, you can easily find the VAR or VAR directory in your user directory and go from there. On Windows and Linux, I'm not sure what the deal is. Sorry, but it's actually probably just easier to get to. The options are pretty simple concepts. Keep FPS will keep your output file to its original target's frame rate instead of converting it to the default 25 FPS. Keep Temp will make it so that all of the images created for each output before it merges them will be kept in the default folder, therefore no longer temporary. Skip Audio will strip the audio from your target. Well, technically, it just won't add it back in when it's creating the output file. And Skip Download is kind of a weird one that has little use, in my opinion. When you switch to a particular face swapper model or a face enhancer model, it has to download it the first time. If you have this selected, it won't download it. At least that's how I've come to understand it. It's something I've never had a use for, but maybe useful in some case that I don't understand. Maybe if it's corrupt or something. For the rest of the features, we're going to need to actually show what is going on. So I'm going to put in a target. I'll use a short clip from a Tyler Hubbard video. With that in now, you can see a ton of stuff lighting up and change. So let's start from the top right with the preview window. This is probably the most important window as it's where you can see any and all changes before rendering out your final picture or video. Just below that is the preview frame slider. It's currently on frame 0, but you can slide it around to a different number to see a different specific frame in the preview window. Switching between which frame it is on is very useful when you have multiple cuts or scenes within a single video for reasons I'll explain with the options below. First, with trim frame start and end, by default they will be set to the first and last frame of your entire clip. And if you don't change it, it will render the entire video when you hit start. But if you only want one portion of the video, you use the preview frame above to see what frames you actually want to render out, and then set the start and end to those. Say I only wanted to show one quick cut of Terry Crews dancing. I can see that at frame 24, it starts this cut, and then it ends at frame 40. So I can just easily change the trim frame start and the trim frame end to 24 and 40, and that way it'll only render out that one little cut of 16 or so frames. Under Face Selector mode, you can see there are 3 options: Reference, One, and Many. With Reference selected, you can see the reference face just below that shows a bunch of faces. To show how this works, we're going to need to bring in our source image. It seemed appropriate to use Robert Downey Jr. for this example.
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
You might not see anything happen at first, and that could be because it's trying to put the face on someone that was in the beginning of the clip, but not in this shot. So what you want to do now with reference turned on is select the face that you want to swap Robert Downey Jr. onto. You can just as easily pick someone else from the references. Because the preview is such a low resolution, it can be difficult to see how much is actually changing until you render it out. While still using reference, let's look at the reference face distance. I'm not really sure why it's called distance, but what it does is find faces that are either less or more like the image you chose. If you turn it up too high, it will start to think everyone is your reference and change multiple faces. But if you turn it down too low, it will think it's a different person just between frames or scenes with different lighting when it's still the same person. So you'll get flashing in and out if it's close or just shots that aren't changed at all. Usually the default works great, but you'll find reasons to play with it a bit depending on your video. After reference is 1. This will always only pick one face from the entire video. The trick is getting it to pick the one you want. Now if you only have one person in the entire video, then it's going to be pretty simple. If you have 2, 3 maybe, still pretty easy. But when you have more faces in the video, especially when you get pretty high up, this can become a huge PETA. But if you skip down to the face analyzers, which they spell incorrectly here, you have a few tools to try and pick the one you want. And these analyzers work for reference and many also. First with order, given the first 2 options, you'd either get the person on the far right or the far left of the picture. And it's for the first frame of your video. If it's someone not in the first frame, good luck. If we wanted to pick Terry Crews, top to bottom would work and would large to small. I have no idea how best or worst are decided, but in this situation, if you wanted one of the guys just to his left or right, I don't see how this would work. The age analyzer is pretty obvious, but it will allow you to narrow down if you have a range of obvious age differences within the video. If I quickly go back to reference, you can see that it accurately portrays them all as adults. No children, teens, or seniors. The last one is gender. I shouldn't have to explain this one as it's the same as age, but, well, gender, male or female. However, this one doesn't seem to work as well. Just to show what I mean, if I choose male, there's only one image and that looks like it's a female, and for some reason, that's it for reference. If I put the female, for some reason it thinks all of them, including Terry Crews, is a female. So back to the face selector mode. Let's check many. What this one is going to do is use your source image on as many faces as it can make out well enough, and you can use the analyzers for exclusions. 99% of the time, I'm using reference mode and almost never use the analyzers. There are rare occasions where I find them useful, but not too often. The last thing on the right side that isn't part of the masking is the face detector model section. I've always left this on retina face. However, with retina face selected, it makes the next part, the face detector size, absolutely worthless. If you try anything other than the default 640 by 640, it will come up as an error. If you switch it to UNet, and then switch it around, it will allow you to change the size. Now, I haven't played around with this much, but what it seems to be is something that helps you select faces when they're too close to the edge or cut off. Normally I wouldn't use it, but if you can't seem to get a face selected, try this out. As for the face detector score, though I don't use this too often, it can be useful. This is usually good set to the default center, but this is how tight or loosely it determines what a face is within your image or video. Turn it down a bit to try to recognize a face that wasn't all that obvious. but go too low, and it will think all random things are faces. Turn it up, and you'll get fewer faces, which may be a good thing, as the ones it doesn't pick up still probably wouldn't have had much of a good output anyway. But go too high, and it won't pick up anything. Now let's switch back over to the very first thing we looked at for a half second earlier. Frame processors. Face swapper is what you're going to want to use almost all of the time for obvious reasons. This gives you the option of 5 different face swapper models. By default, it's set to InSwapper 128, and it's a pretty good one. In fact, maybe the best option? I was going to let you figure it out what is best on your own, but instead, I ran a test of each one to show you what they all look like with the basic settings. Here you can see that Blend Swap looks pretty bad and it took 56 seconds. InSwapper looks pretty good and took 15 seconds. InSwapper FP16 looks marginally better, but also took 2 minutes and 53 seconds. SimSwap 256 looks pretty bad, but only took 15 seconds. And the 512 unofficial took longer at 26 seconds, but looks even worse. So as I said, InSwapper 128 is probably the best option, unless time really is of no concern and you want the marginally better output of the FP16. And just to show you how it turns out if you put on the default face enhancer on the 2 good ones and the maybe okay one, here are how they turned out. Both of the InSwappers look pretty darn good, but I don't think the face enhancer was able to save the sim swap. So definitely no point in trying the other two. Now that you've seen what the default face enhancer can do, let's take a look at its other models and settings. FaceFusion gives you 7 different model options. I have not tried all of them, but I'm pretty happy with the ones I have used. Like FaceSwapper, let's look at the outputs of the 4 that I have used. First, here's what the clip looks like without turning on the enhancer. For not being enhanced, I'd say it turned out pretty decent. And now here are the 4 results. GFP GAN 1.4 looks great and took 2 minutes and 3 seconds to render. However, it can look a bit plasticky depending on the scene. CodeFormer took a bit longer at 2 minutes and 58 seconds, but looks a bit better by not looking so plasticky. GPen BFR 512 looks almost identical to CodeFormer and took the exact same amount of time at 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Restore Former took 4 minutes and 2 seconds and seems to have some problems. You can see how it even distorted a large portion of the clock. So to me, it's a toss-up between CodeFormer and GPen, etc. for the more realistic film look, while GFP GAN 1.4 is faster and also works very well for cartoonish and current AI videos being made with Pika, Moon Valley, and Gen 2, etc. There's still one more setting for Face Enhancer, and that's the blend. Its default is set to 80 and tends to be good enough, but you can put it down a bit to get rid of some of the plasticky look. I never go below 50, or up for some reason if you want more. Now, Frame Enhancer, I never use. Basically, it's a video upscaler. If you need your video to be larger in scale, then maybe this will be useful for you. You have 3 options of models. The first one will double the resolution, while the other 2 will quadruple the resolution. So if you start with a 1080p, you'll get 4K or 8K respectively. I use real ESR GAN, so either one of these 2, all the time for still images and would recommend going with that. The main reason I never use it though is the additional time is kind of insane. If you're ever wondering why a render is taking so long, double check that you didn't accidentally choose Frame Enhancer instead of Face Enhancer. Now, the last one is Face Debugger, which I think should be renamed personally, as you aren't really doing any debugging. But this is where all of the face masking comes into play. Let's turn that on and see what we get. So let me bring in a new target. and a new source. Just to make sure that she is the one that's being selected, let's choose her in the reference face. And it's actually doing the wrong thing right now. It should be showing a box and not doing what occlusion actually does. Let me try switching those around, see what happens. There we go. Weird. So now, with just her selected, you can now see a red square around her face. That's the face mask box to show you which face will be swapped and what area will be affected. As you can see, face mask is selected under the face debugger items. Turn that off, and the square goes away. KPS is also turned on, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything with this frame, as I believe her face is too small in this to show up. So let's go to a later point in the clip. And because I don't want this to get too weird, let's pick a different source picture for this. You can see when I pick his reference face that he now has a square and 5 dots that signify where his eyes, nose, and lips are for tracking. I think KPS stands for key points or something like that. Now let's make him Steve Carell. Now B box, I'm assuming bounding box, as far as I can tell, doesn't really do anything other than highlight which face will be swapped. Turn that on. Okay, now it's not getting any. So maybe this is a bug and this is hopefully something they'll fix really soon, but it seems whenever I actually put the source image in now during Face Debugger, it will then completely get rid of all the information in the preview frame to see what is actually shown for masking. So like right now, if I put Steve Carell back in, it changes the image. However, the masking information for the debugging is gone. Changing frames or whatever does not change that. If I get rid of Steve Carell's image, sure enough, there the information is back again. If I choose somebody else, let's go with Michael J. Fox. It changes the image, but again, lose all the information. So for now, I'm just going to keep the source out of there so you can see what's supposed to be happening without the image changing. And the last of the Face Debugger items is score. You turn that on, it puts up a number in the box, and based on that number, that's how high you can put up the face detector score slider and still have it select that face. So seeing that it's 0.91 right now, I should be able to put it all the way up to 0.9. Sure enough, it still shows his face selected. If I put that to 0.95, no longer selected. The real reason for using this is maybe if you have so many people that are in it that look somewhat similar and you want to get as close as possible to only selecting that person, maybe you can fine tune it so that it won't switch. I don't know. So now back to face masks. Let's first turn off the score and let's turn off the bounding box. Now take a look over on the right where all the masking tools are available. First we'll take a look at the box that's titled Face Mask Type. As it's set up now, you can see where that square is around his head. Everything within the square can be affected by the face swap, including his jacket and shirt. Most likely, nothing will happen to them with a simple shot like this, but if you want to make sure not as much is affected, that's where you can choose the different padding sliders to make the square smaller or larger. In this case, maybe you just want to slide it up a little bit from the bottom so you don't get so much of his shirt, so you just do the face mask padding bottom and slide that over a little bit. See how much that changes. Oh, that changed the left side for some reason. Let's try that again. Okay, I don't know where that came from, but all of a sudden the left side is all messed up. So let's do the left. Bring that in a bit. That seems to be working. And you just want to get close. You don't want to go over the actual head in any way whatsoever unless there's something on the face you do not want to be masked. The other option is the blur. This is the amount, or I believe more accurately, the width of the outside of the mask that is blurred to make the new face look more natural on the target video or image. It's very difficult to see anything change on such a small preview that you'll have to test it out for yourself on your own projects. Now, instead of the box face mask type, there is Occlusion. This seems to be a bit smarter masking tool, and I hope it is, as there are no settings for it. With this current shot though, there isn't much of a reason to use Occlusion. So let's take a look at another frame. You can see here that the man in the middle has a beer mug partially covering his face. Usually this would have been a big issue and caused weird artifacting. Now with Occlusion, let me first select his face. You can see how it automatically masks out the mug with zero work. Go back a few frames, and you can see how the mask opens up at the bottom as more of his face is revealed. And for the final option, which is Region, let's bring in one last clip. This is what you use if you don't want something to change. Say you want to keep someone's crazy eyes or keep their specific eye color and the way they look around. You can turn off the eyes and they won't be affected by the swap. Looking at the other options, I'm sure you get the idea. You can, of course, also use the different face mask types at the same time. So if you like those eyes, but he's drinking a beer at the same time, use both Occlusion and Region. Anyway, I think that's more than enough for now. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. I appreciate you watching the video. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Have a wonderful day, and take care.